Welcome to the study section 2 of ANA 212 Regional Anatomy. We'll be discussing the head. The head consists of the brain, its protective coverings, and the ear and the face. The cranium is the skeleton of the head. Learning the features of the cranium serves as an important framework to facilitate the understanding of the head region. In this study section, you will be introduced to the cranium and its features, the scalp, the cranial meninges, and the brain. When you will have studied this study section 2, you should be able to describe the cranium and its features. You should be able to describe the scalp. You should be able to list the cranial meninges, and you should be able to describe the brain. Let's start with the cranium. The cranium is the skeletal structure of the head that supports the face and protects the brain. The cranium consists of two parts. We have the neurocranium and viscerocranium. The neurocranium, that is the cranial foot, is the bony covering of the brain and its membranous covering and the cranial meninges. It also contains the proximal parts of the cranial nerves and the vasculature of the brain. The neurocranium has a dome-like roof, the carparium, that is the skull cap, and a floor or cranial base, that is the basicranium. The neurocranium is formed by 8 bones, four singular bones centered on the midline, that is the frontal bone, the ethmoid bone, the sphenoid bone, and the occipital bone, and 2 sets of bones occurring as bilateral pairs, that is the temporal and the parietal bone. Most carparian bones are united by fibrous interlocking sutures. However, during childbirth, some bones, that is the sphenoid and the occipital bone, are united by hyaline cartilage. The viscerocranium, that is the facial skeleton, is made up of the facial bones that maintains developed in the mesenchyme of the embryonic pharyngeal arch. The viscerocranium forms the anterior part of the cranium and consists of bones surrounding the mouth, the nose, and most of the orbit. It consists of 15 irregular bones, 3 singular bones lying in the midline, that is the mandible, the ethmoid, and the femur bone, and 6 pair bones occurring bilaterally, that is the maxilla, inferior nasal concha, that is the turbinate, and the zygomatic, palatine, and nasal bone. In the adults, the skull consists of 12 individual bones, 21 of which are immobile and united into a single unit. The 22nd bone is the mandible, that is the lower jaw, which is the only movable bone of the skull. This is the anterior view of the adult cranium, and this is the lateral view of the adult cranium. Let's go to the scalp. The scalp consists of skin and subcutaneous tissue that covers the neurocranium from the superior nodular line on the occipital bone to the supraorbital margins of the frontal bone. Laterally, the scalp extends over the temporal fascia to the zygomatic ax. The neurovascular structures of the scalp are discussed with those of the face. The scalp is composed of 5 layers, the first 3 of which are connected intimately, thus moving as a unit. For example, when wrinkling the forehead, each letter in the word's cap serves as a memory key for one of its 5 layers that covers the neurocranium. That is the skin, which stands for S, the connective tissue stands for C, A stands for aponeurosis, S stands for loose connective tissue, and P stands for pericranium. The cranial meninges. The cranial meninges are covering of the brain that lie immediately internal to the cranium. The meninges protect the brain, form the supportive framework for arteries, veins, and venous sinuses, and enclose a fluid-filled cavity, the subarachnoid space. The meninges are composed of 3 membranous connective tissue layers. We have the dura mater, which is tough, thick external fibrous layer. We have the arachnoid mater, that is thin intermediate layer, and the pia mater, that is delicate internal vascular layer. The arachnoid and pia are continuous membranes that make up the leptomeninges. The arachnoid is separated from the pia by the subarachnoid space, which contains cerebrospinal fluid. This is a clear liquid similar in constitution to blood. It provides nutrients but has less protein and a different ion concentration. Cerebrospinal fluid is formed predominantly by the choroid pleasures within the 4 ventricles of the brain. CSF leaves the ventricular system of the brain and enters the subarachnoid space, where it cushions and nourishes the brain. The dura mater. The dura mater, or a 2-layer membrane that is adherent to the internal surface of the cranium, consists of an external periosteal layer formed by the periosteum covering the internal surface of the capillarium. An internal meningeal layer is a strong fibrous membrane that is continuous at the foramen magnum, with the dura covering the spinal cord. The brain. The brain and the spinal cord are the central nervous systems. The brain is composed of the cerebrum, cerebellum, and the brain stem, that is the midbrain, pons, and medulla oblongata. Of the 12 cranial nerves, 11 cranial nerves arise from the brain. They have motor, parasympathetic, and sensory functions. Generally, these nerves are surrounded by a dura sheath. As they leave the cranium, the dura sheath becomes continuous with the connective tissue and the epineurium. Thanks you for listening. See you in the next class.